Hello, my name is Vinko. I'm an artist from South Australia and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'll be creating an artwork inspired by Alice in Wonderland, particularly the original animated film. It's something that has been a huge inspiration and influence over me ever since I saw the movie as a young child, and it has provided the inspiration for today's artwork. The scene that inspired this artwork is the moment that Alice stumbles upon the blue caterpillar sitting on that giant mushroom, puffing away at his shisha pipe, blowing out smoke rings and letters, and he turns to Alice and says, "Who are you?" It's that moment. That is the moment I wanted to capture in the artwork we'll be making today. Like many of my artworks, it all starts with a foundation, a sketch, which lives here in my sketchbook. Just like all the others, this is what the sketch looked like and where this artwork started. See if you can get a better view. There we go. Now, it's not the prettiest thing in the world, but it is my idea, and that's all I need. So from this point, I photograph that page and I bring it into Procreate on the iPad Pro using the Apple Pencil. I trace that sketch and refine it to a point where I'm happy with the line work. Once I'm happy with the line work, I print that out and I trace it onto my final working surface, which in today's case will be the Arches 300 GSM cold press paper, 100% cotton. So not really paper, but it is one of my favorite surfaces to work on, especially if I'm using things like ink or the Copic markers, which today's project will be made from. It's not the best for Copics because it's extremely absorbent, very thirsty paper, so it does use a lot of ink. And as we all know, Copics aren't the cheapest markers on the market, but they are my favorite. And this paper is the best. It's extremely absorbent and highly durable. You can keep layering and layering the ink on top of it and it doesn't warp, and I love using it, so I'd highly recommend you use it. It's the best in my opinion. Anyway, without further ado, we'll jump to the iPad drawing and then into the time lapse where I'll walk you through the process and what I've used and how I created the Alice in Wonderland's blue caterpillar. So, see you there. And here we are, we're in the iPad. I am using the stock standard studio pen that comes with Procreate. And this process here is really just a stage of refinement where I trace over the sketch, making any corrections I see necessary. I'm really just wanting to define each element and have a very legible line drawing to transfer onto my final working surface. So that's the main aim and focus of this process. I will generally print this out to size, then trace it onto my final working surface using graphite pencils, because this gives me the opportunity to make any last minute changes before I make the line work permanent using ink. I do this using the fine liners by Copic. The reason I do this is because I know it's already compatible with the Copic markers. It won't bleed or smudge, and that is essentially why I use the Copic fine liners, but I also really like the Artline. I will generally use a 0.8 or 1.0 for the bold lines in my drawings, and a 0.3 or a 0.5 for the finer and tighter details. As you can see in the time lapse, I am blocking in the background, and I'm doing this using a mixture of India ink that I dilute down using water to achieve different tonal values. The reason I choose Indian ink to block in the background is because it sets permanent. Once it's dry, it won't be reactivated with water, and I know that it won't react with the Copic markers, so it is a very reliable media to use for my backgrounds. Now we can go through and introduce some coloring to this drawing. I'm rendering this using the Copic markers, as I mentioned earlier. And what I really enjoy about this process is the gradual build-up, working from light to dark, because generally when using inks, you can always make an area darker. You can't always make it lighter. There are exceptions to this rule. You can use the colorless blender by the Copic markers, and this will lighten an area, but sometimes it's not enough, and I will generally opt for using the Prisma color pencils to add lighter tones or values once I have already laid down the ink. When rendering characters or the body, I don't approach it in any other way. I still work from light to dark, but I'm always paying attention to the light source and form and shape, how these different elements are interacting in the environment, how it's catching the light, and how it's bending, in this case, with the body of the caterpillar. Now rendering the face. This is where I appreciate the ink process so much, because it's a gradual build-up, so it's no sudden decisions. You can go through and gradually build it up until you reach your desired contrast. I will generally render out the entire piece to about 80%, I'd say, until I'm generally happy with the overall color and contrast. But then I will go through and do a final pass, adding in the real deep shadows, as you can see I'm doing here. And this just delivers that final punch and really just pushes that drawing over the line. And I really like the details. So as you can see, I'll really spend the time getting each one of those bands just right. But it's all this detail that makes these drawings so much fun. And I feel like in the world of Alice in Wonderland, there are all these little things that are happening in the background that you might not notice upon first glance, but the more you pay attention, the more you notice. And I feel like that is something I kept in mind while creating this artwork as well. Every time I look at it, I find just another little moment that I didn't really notice or appreciate as much the last time I looked at it. Of course, you've got to emphasize the eyes, make sure they're on point, very important. Final little details and my signature. Of course, we've got to clean up the borders, make this a presentable artwork. Thank you so much for joining me on this process. Enjoy the final shots. And if you got some value out of this, I would really appreciate it if you'd like the video and considered subscribing. It's right at the beginning of this channel's life, so any and all support is much appreciated. And that's about it. Until next time, stay creative. Peace!